Hello, beautiful humans, and welcome to episode 6 of Your Success Journey. And welcome to the Self Growth Lab, spreading hope and inspiration for your transformation so that you can live the life of your dreams. Let's just do a quick recap on episode 5. So, we looked at the Wheel of Life tool again, and I said, we can use this tool over and over again just to check in on yourself, and see where you are at, where you're making improvements, and, where you're struggling. And you can do that maybe once a month or once every 6 months, whatever feels good to you. You got clear on 4 things. So the first thing was you decided on a vision for each area of your wheel of life, and you decided to work on 1 or 2 areas over the next 2 to 3 months. And then number 2, you set specific goals for the areas that you want to work on. And then number 3, you decided on an action plan, and you wrote that out, like to see what I need to work towards, right? And number 4, you started taking actual action towards achieving these goals over the last week. So I always suggest maybe working Monday to Friday or Monday to Saturday on your wheel of life, because we do need a break. We just need to downtime as well, not to work on this, and that's absolutely fine, and that's, I think, healthy. And I just wanted to say high five and well done for following through. So, in fact, you can press pause and you can go stand in front of the mirror and give yourself a high five. There's psychology behind that. Someone wrote a whole book on high fiving. And maybe just say to yourself something like, well done for being a doer. I am someone who follows through. Something like that, that feels good to you. So you are really on track now to, build the habits to start helping you create this dream life for yourself. And this is what it basically looks like in the brain, the formation of new neural pathways. So keep doing the work, and those connections get stronger until they become automatic. For example, like setting aside this 20 or 30 minutes a day, or however long you want to, Monday to Friday or Monday to Saturday, to work on your success journey. So it will become a good habit. And the stronger those connections become, the easier it's going to be to actually do the work. So you're basically slowly rewiring your brain, and it's going to perform better as a result. The key though is to be consistent, all right, is to do it regularly. I know life happens, so you might miss a day here and there. Generally, I would say try not to miss more than, 2 days at a time, if necessary. So I think you can see, after looking at that diagram of, those connections forming in the brain, it's important that we continue, that we persist, that we also patient with ourselves as we're busy making these changes, and also to be kind and understanding to ourselves when we do fall back into those old pathways that are more established, right? And then just to be aware of things like that voice that tries to say to us, you don't have to do this now, you can start tomorrow, things like that. Just gently say, you know what, I am going to do this because it's something I want to do, and I am worthy and deserving of forming these new habits for a new and happier life, or a more successful life. Just give yourself the permission to do the work you need to do. So you can choose other words as well that feel good to you in the moment. And you also know that you need to move through the discomfort of forming the habits, right? We spoke about that as well. It can be uncomfortable when we're building these new habits. So, story time. Have you ever moved a kettle in your kitchen and plugged it in on the other side, or moved something else around, and you keep going back to the place where it used to be, right? So that's an old habit. That's an old path in your brain. And you keep wanting to use that automatically. You want to keep going back to that spot automatically. And it takes time to get used to moving to the new spot. to either switch a kettle on or use whatever other appliance or thing that you've moved. So in the beginning, you kind of have to stop yourself and be like, oh, wait, I moved that. And then you go over there to where it is, and you maybe have a little chuckle to yourself. And every time you choose to walk to that new spot, what you're doing is you're forming a new habit, you're creating a new pathway, right? And when you've done that enough times, it becomes almost automatic. You don't have to really think about it. You don't have to stop and consciously say, okay, wait, I need to go over there now. So you've now formed a new habit. So it's like that with most of the habits that we're forming, either ones that we want to break or ones that we want to create. So we maybe catch ourselves in the old habit and we stop and think, whoa, hang on a second, I'm not doing this anymore. I need to be doing something different, or I need to just stop doing that. Or we catch ourselves like making these excuses, right? About why we can't do the new habit. We'll start tomorrow or something like that. But we now know that we need to move through the discomfort of forming this new habit. Okay, as we become more self aware of what we're doing and what we're thinking throughout the day, it does become easier. And that's also something, we have to train ourselves to do. But another example can be like if you catch yourself going to go and watch like 4 episodes of a series, and you're like, oh, hang on a second, I don't need to watch all four. I want to study later. So now you choose to watch maybe just one episode, and then you use the rest of that time you would have spent watching that series, you use it to work on yourself, to work on the skill you're developing or something that you're studying. So this is how we interrupt old habits and form new ones that are more helpful for us. Or if it's just a habit we want to stop, we just try and stop that old habit. So you can write this down and repeat after me. Repetition becomes habit, and habit becomes automatic. And that makes life a lot easier. So if you look at this diagram, you can see, we're going from old ways that no longer serve us to new ways of thinking, feeling, and behaving. We're creating new helpful patterns and habits that help us to move forward towards what we want. So let's move on to step 6. I mentioned a formula previously, how thoughts become things, which we can call TAR, TAR. Thoughts, actions, results. So basically, it reminds me of the road you're going down, or the road we're going down on our journey of success. So our thoughts create our actions ultimately, and our actions create our results. There are certain times where sometimes trauma causes us to have reactions, and that's another layer we'll look at as well. And that can obviously also create results as well. But this is just the basic flow of what's happening within, right? And psychology agrees with this. So thoughts can become material things like the device you're using to watch this on, or they can create experiences. So if our thoughts and feelings are either moving us towards what we want or away from what we want, like blocking us from what we want, then obviously it's important for us to know exactly where they're coming from, what's happening within ourselves, so that we can make changes that we need to. We just need to figure out what's no longer working for us within, and then just make the changes that will resolve that. So no one can obviously do the work for us. If you look at this diagram again, we need to do the work if we want to get better results. I'm sure with technology this will change in the future, but for now we need to do it for ourselves. So let's just look at a few real world examples of how our unhelpful thoughts and feelings can influence our results. So see if they sound familiar, right? Let's say you want to make some new friends or you want to join a community. So you have this unhelpful thought or this limiting thought that says, what if they don't like me? This then causes a fear response, or you feel maybe a bit nervous. So, how do you behave? Well, you might avoid going over to them, or you might avoid joining the community. Another example, maybe in class or at work, the goal is you want to answer a question. And then you have this limiting thought, but what if I'm wrong? People might laugh at me. And this creates a feeling of fear. And then how do you behave? You probably will stay quiet and not answer the question, and you won't learn and grow. Or maybe you want to join a team. So the goal is you want to try out for a team of maybe sport or a chess team or any team like that. Um, or any team, not like that specifically. And you have this limiting thought maybe that others are better than me. So that creates a feeling of fear again. And how do you behave? You avoid trying out. So you miss out on that experience as well. Or maybe with studying, the goal you set for yourself is you want to study more, and you have this limiting thought, but I'll fail anyway, or I won't do as well as I want, or I don't understand the subject. And this again creates fear within us. And how do you behave? You delay studying, or you avoid studying, or you keep avoiding researching the subject. So these are unhelpful thoughts that kind of block us from trying, and if we don't try, we're not going to succeed. So I just want to go through this more expanded model of our inner system, and I wanted to just show you something that I have added in here. So if we look at our roots, all right, so we've got what I call experiences, right? And everything begins with what we experience: events, situations, relationships, successes, failures, painful experiences, and joyful moments. And that's kind of like the swell for our roots, right? So, experience can create things like love and support, encouragement, or success, but it can also create painful events, rejection, criticism. We then make meaning out of that. We call that learning. So, what did I learn? Our brain creates meaning from these experiences. So, things like on the right, it's not my fault, I am valuable, I did my best. Or we've got more negative meanings like it's my fault, I'm not important, I'm to blame. This then creates what we call safety learning and trauma response. So our system learns what is dangerous or safe based on past experiences, and triggers can cause automatic threat responses. So, for example, on the right, we've got there, this is safe, I can handle it, versus this is dangerous, I could get hurt, or I can't cope. And then this leads to our core beliefs. So we have these deep underlying beliefs that we know as our roots about ourselves, others, and life that we've looked at. Things like I'm enough, I matter, or I'm not enough, I don't matter. And then these core beliefs go on to create survival rules or survival programs. So these are rules our system creates to keep us safe and avoid pain, and they drive our automatic survival programs. For example, I allow myself to be human, which is positive. I can say no, which is also a positive core belief, or mistakes help me grow, versus negative core beliefs like I must be perfect, I must please everyone, I must not make mistakes. And then the rest of the cycle. So that influences beliefs or thought patterns or creates them. Our beliefs shape how we think, obviously, about ourselves, others' life, and what's possible, and they create our internal lens. So, again, I'm enough, I can learn and grow, I trust myself, or I'm not good enough, I can't trust myself, it's not possible. These are the kind of thought patterns that we have. And then the emotions we feel. So our thoughts and beliefs obviously create our emotions, and emotions influence how we respond. So we've got joy, confidence, peace, or we have anxiety, guilt, and fear. And altogether, this is creating our results, and they just kind of reinforce our beliefs and keep the cycle going unless we choose to change them. Obviously, we're wanting to change the unhelpful thoughts, right? The negative thoughts. And that in turn is our harvest, or the results are our harvest. So I wanted to show the trauma side to this as well. Like not everyone's had deep trauma, but some of us have had that, but others have also just had experiences that were traumatic that have affected them internally as well. And I've learned that, sometimes when people are trying to recode a new belief, they're doing all the work, but they're just not making any progress. And that's because there is some trauma linked to, that area of their life. There's some trauma related issues that need to be resolved as well. So they can be very frustrated because they feel like I'm doing all this work, but nothing's changing. But they haven't taken into account that sometimes the brain will reject that those new affirmations that you're trying to do if there is trauma underneath it. So that is a possibility that we need to look at as well. So some people may need to work with a trauma specialist in situations where there's deep trauma, or use trauma informed tools and techniques to help them with recoding effectively. But we'll look at that just now as well. And yeah, I think it's important to just give that some consideration if you are struggling with something specifically. Right, so now you have a clear idea of what is blocking us from success. And we understand this at a deeper level now. We understand that there can be trauma as well. Um, and now we're going to look at, well, what do we do? How do we overcome these blocks? What is the way forward? I use the recode word just as like an umbrella term for what we need to do within ourselves, in order to update our internal system to the level that we want. So there's many tools and techniques to recode ourselves, but the basic recoding practice is the same, or similar. We need to reparent, repattern, and reprogram ourselves. And I'm going to explain this in a little bit more detail. Okay, so this diagram just shows that, reparenting, repatting, and reprogramming isn't just something we do inside our heads. It changes how we actually live across, the different areas of the wheel of life. So it's just an example. But if we look at recoding, at the recoding model, just to define recoding, it's really the process of updating the old beliefs, emotional responses, protective patterns, and behaviors that we learn through our experiences so that we can respond to life from greater safety, self trust, choice, and possibility. Think of it as updating your inner operating system or your inner system, as I've been saying. So, the three connected processes, the reparent really means to change how you relate to yourself. To repattern means to change how you respond. And to reprogram means to change the deeper beliefs and expectations underneath your responses. And because these patterns affect every part of our lives, we can see them clearly through the wheel of life. So, if we look at reparent, I learned to become a safe and supported person for myself. Reparenting means learning to give yourself things you may not have consistently received earlier in life or may have stopped giving yourself along the way. And this includes things like self compassion, validation, boundaries, encouragement, protection, emotional support, patience, permission to have needs. Instead of what's wrong with me, we learn to ask, what do I need right now? So, some real life examples across the wheel of life. If we look at our self growth area, so if, for example, you say or think to yourself, I should know how to do this already, reparenting means you say things to yourself like, it's okay not to know yet. I can learn. You stop attacking yourself for making mistakes and start treating yourself like someone you're responsible for helping grow. If we look at our purpose and performance area or segment on our wheel of life, an old response could be, if I don't succeed, I'm a failure. Reparenting, you could say something like, my performance doesn't determine my worth. I can support myself while I learn. So you give yourself encouragement rather than using fear and criticism as your primary motivation. If we look at our relationships, an old response could be, I need to keep everyone happy so that they won't leave me. And reparenting would be, my needs matter too. I can care about other people without abandoning myself. So you begin practicing like boundaries and allowing relationships to become more healthier. And then when we repattern, it's like a new way of responding to life. So it's about changing those automatic responses that we used to, how we used to reacting. For example, in your self-growth area, an old pattern could be you make a mistake and you think to yourself, I'm useless, so you feel like shame and then you give up. But a new pattern can be, you make a mistake, you pause, you learn from it, and you try again. That's how we grow. We learn from our mistakes. So you're building like resilience instead of criticizing yourself, instead of putting yourself down. And then if we look at our purpose and performance area segment on our wheel of life, um, an old pattern could be like you have a big goal, so you feel overwhelmed, you procrastinate, you feel guilt, so you create more avoidance. And a new pattern could be you have the big goal, you break it into small action steps, you just start, you learn from experience, you experience progress, and you continue. So you're teaching yourself, I don't have to feel completely ready before I begin. Just start. And then we look at the reprogramming part of this, and that's updating the belief underneath the pattern. So reprogramming obviously happens at the deeper level, as we've looked at, and we ask like, what have I come to believe about myself, other people, life, and what is possible? And we're doing this, in general, but also in the segments on your wheel of life. So, for example, someone might keep procrastinating, right? So the surface problem seems like I don't take action, but underneath it may be an belief like if I fail, I'll prove I'm not capable. And underneath that might be a deeper identity belief, who I am isn't enough. So now we're working at a level of the roots or at the roots. So a real life example for that can be if we look at our self growth area, the old programming, I'm not capable. The new programming can say something like, I am capable of learning, growing, and figuring things out. If we look at the purpose and performance area, the old programming could be, success is dangerous because if I fail, I'll lose everything. The new programming can be something like, I can grow, succeed, make mistakes, and keep going. Success doesn't have to be all or nothing. And then relationships, an old program could be, I have to earn love. And the new programming could be, I can be loved consistently without having to prove my worth. So we can look at these real life examples in all areas and just figure out, okay, now how does this apply to me? And how can I use this to help me make my own changes? So these three sort of reparent, repattern, reprogram, they work together or they overlap each other. For example, if someone like has a goal but they keep procrastinating, right? They can reparent by saying like, I'm not going to shame myself for struggling. What do I need to do right now? And this creates safety and support for yourself. And then you repattern by saying, instead of avoiding the task, I'll take one small action that creates a new behavior. So a new pattern, you're repatterning. And then to reprogram this area, you're taking action, saying to yourself, taking action doesn't have to mean I'm going to fail. I'm capable of following through. And this updates the deeper belief, and that equals your recoding. So you're obviously recoding that specific area or issue. So what you'll find is you'll gradually develop a different relationship with yourself, a different response to challenges as well, and a different belief about what is possible. When we look at trauma-informed recoding, for someone whose patterns are strongly connected to trauma, we can add another layer, and that is safety, choice, and pacing. So we don't just simply, say that you must think differently. We first recognize that your mind and body may have learned a certain response because it once helped you to survive. So the process might become you reparent by saying, I'm safe enough to support myself now. You repattern by saying, I can learn a different response. And you reprogram by saying, I can update the old belief. And then you repeat that. I give myself new experiences until the new response becomes more familiar. I'll give you sort of an example I had with my uncle, whom I hadn't seen in over a decade. And there were one or two, past, I wouldn't say traumas, but experiences that were unpleasant. But I also had grown up in a abusive home, but my father had, or my grandfather had said some nasty things about my uncle, which I kind of imprinted over time, I guess. But to cut a long story short, I had a reaction with him the one day in a moment where I completely lost my temper. I couldn't control myself, and I was like screaming at the top of my voice at him, or at the top of my lungs. And I didn't understand why I couldn't control myself because I've worked so many years on, just becoming a better human, basically, and trying to be kinder and calmer and all of these things. But in that moment, I completely lost it. And I eventually did some research and uncovered that what had happened in that specific situation with him had triggered within me a past trauma, and I just reacted automatically. And my reaction came from a trauma imprint from not having a voice as a child because I was abused. So when he wouldn't listen to me in that moment, I automatically reacted without consciously thinking about it. So there was no thought in that experience that caused me to behave like it. It was just a nervous system response. So this is what we mean by trauma and reacting in ways that are not necessarily good. So that was more like an automatic response, right? So when we are recoding, for most people, it's general recoding, but sometimes we have to use trauma informed techniques as well. So, because I had studied so much of this by that stage when I had had this incident with my uncle, I knew what to do. So, I became aware of it. I researched, I figured out what had triggered me to behave like that. And I was able to then be aware of in future, that if he um, spoke in that manner or whatever and didn't let me respond, I could behave differently. I could walk away. And subsequently, one or two more incidences did occur that were not bad or anything, but just the way he said things or the way he, behaved, um, started bringing that up in me again, and I was able to, that anger, and I was able to just walk away, calm down, and then go have a conversation later. So I was able to manage that, and that was interrupting the old response. So it wasn't just interrupting an old pattern or an old habit. It was an old habit. It was interrupting a automatic response. I was able to prevent that. And that's the power of recoding and awareness and understanding, what makes us angry or sad or whatever the case may be. So before we look at the tasks for this week, I just wanted to say this. I know it might seem like a lot of work now that needs to be done, but it's all about those small steps, right? It comes back to making a little bit progress every day, maybe Monday to Friday, Monday to Saturday, and just doing the little things, being aware of yourself throughout the day, how you're thinking, feeling, and behaving, and just trying to start making these small changes. So we don't need to overwhelm ourselves and try and fix everything overnight. That's not necessarily going to happen. It's highly unlikely. We need to do it little bit by little bit. And we're all different, we all have different things and different areas we need to work on. So, what you're basically doing now is you're beginning to build a solid foundation for your success journey. And I believe that we learn things in layers. You know, we can take in so much information and then like pause a little bit there and then expand on that idea or that concept and learn more about it. And slowly we just build a bigger picture, right? So I've also decided like I'm not going to just leave you to try and figure this out all on your own. I'm going to do a follow up series to the Your Success Journey series. I'll probably call it Your Success Journey Series 2. We'll see. And I will go into each step in more detail because obviously these are much shorter videos, just a basic understanding of these steps. And then we will go in, into more depth, and I'll probably write a more in-depth book as well. So right now, I think it's important to look at all of the information that you've gathered over these few weeks with the Bob exercise and your daily reflections, getting to know yourself better, getting to see how you think, how you feel, and how that's making you behave and your actions throughout the day. Obviously, it's not going to be something you're going to be able to do all day, every day, but we just make notes, when we have a situation and we just notice what did I think, how did I feel, how did I react, and we try and just build this data, this information on ourselves, right? And I did say we're going to use all of this information in step 6. So for this week's tasks, there are 2 tasks. The first one I've just called general recoding. So for this, if you're comfortable with using AI and you are okay with sharing your personal details, then AI, things like ChatGPT I've worked with, is really helpful in unpacking some of our core beliefs. So what you can do with that is you can just type up all of the thoughts and feelings and behaviors you've been having. So all this information that you've gathered, anything else that you think is important from your daily reflections on how you've been behaving and responding or reacting to life, as well as some history on your life, especially if there have been some traumatic events, maybe things from childhood or even in adulthood that you feel could be influencing areas where you are not able to be successful in, which we talk about blocks. So could what things that could be blocking you from achieving success is what I'm trying to say. So you can then ask AI to please help you uncover what your possible core beliefs could be or your possible negative core beliefs could be with or after reading all of this information. Okay, so then you can use either the trauma informed guide for recoding or the general guide for recoding, which I'm going to give a link for in the comments because it's a little exercise that I thought it would be easier if you can just click on the link and go through it yourself. It's just a 10-minute exercise. You might need to do both though, if there is a bit of trauma, and that's something you'll be able to have a look at and decide for yourself. If you don't want to work with AI, that's absolutely fine as well. You can just look through your notes and just sort of decide, what looks like limiting thoughts, what's limiting feelings, what's limiting behaviors, and you can just do some research on that as well and just unpack, what are the core beliefs or the potential beliefs that have been causing this, and is there possible trauma links to this as well. And then some other ideas you can explore is hypnosis and self hypnosis, as well as NLP, which is called neuro linguistic programming. And these are techniques to help you imprint new core beliefs a lot quicker. Now, when I started my journey, I wasn't able to afford going to see a hypnotherapist or anything like that, or these other programs for helping yourself, like NeuroGym, which is a great one. I've had a brief look at it, and I know the founder of that John Assaraf is a great teacher. He's one of the teachers I've learned from. So I couldn't afford things like that when I was starting my journey, obviously, because I had limiting beliefs and I didn't have the money. Um, so yeah, I had to do it old school way and just start doing the research and the imprinting, the recoding myself, little bit by little bit. And yeah, it was a struggle. It's taken many, many years. I'm still working on myself. And I just thought I'd share those other ideas with you because it is possible if you have got the resources to, I wouldn't say shortcut it, but to change these beliefs a bit quicker. Having said that, though, I've done research on that too, and yes, it is possible to imprint a new core belief quite quickly, but and it can have a downstream effect in terms of changing how you behave and things like that, how you think and all of that. But for long term success in that area or with that belief, and to ensure that it stays imprinted, I guess, we still need to do real world actions to just support that belief and develop habits to support that belief. That's my understanding of hypnotherapy and tools like that. Okay, so this is something you can start immediately, which will help you with this foundation. So, task two is then specific or recoding specific life areas. So the first task is like a general overview of what could be your limiting beliefs, and you can get going with that. And then you can start this next task. It can take days, weeks, sometimes even months to go through the wheel of life. But bearing in mind you're only working on one or two areas at a time. So my suggestion is start with the one or two areas that you're working on and do some more digging within yourself in this area that you're struggling in or that you rated yourself low in. And you can again use AI to help you with this to uncover your deeper blocks in that area. So, how can you do that? Well, similar to gathering information like the Bob exercise and the daily reflection, you can do a bit of that. But also, okay, so then you can try this 3 column exercise to help you with this. It's attributed to Judith Beck, whose father was the founder of cognitive therapy. And it's used in CBT, which is cognitive behavioral therapy, especially in the area of core beliefs and cognitive restructuring, which is basically what we're doing, right? So the basic idea is to take a piece of paper, make 3 columns. In the column on the left, you just write at the top limiting belief, and the middle column you write new slash adaptive belief, and in the last column you just write there evidence. So, for example, in your financial area, if you have an old belief that says money is evil, or you believe money is evil, or you grew up believing that, then your new adaptive belief can be money can be used for good. And then for evidence, for example, you can say, you know, I've seen people using money for good. Money feeds people. Money buys shelter and clothing and things like that. So, is money really bad? No, I think money is actually good and it can be used for good. So, you want to just prove to the nervous system that there is evidence to support the new belief. Just to take a step back there, we like unpack our beliefs by simply just sitting down and asking ourselves questions like, what do I believe about finances, about money, for example, if that's the area you're working on. So what did I learn from my parents? What kind of a home environment did I grow up in? Was there lack and limitation? Was it a struggle? Was there fighting about money? So we write down all the things that we believe about money and finances. So like for example, that one money is evil comes from things a lot of children are taught when they're younger, from maybe religious indoctrination, or they've learned it from somewhere else. And there's other ones like money is hard to make, or money causes fighting in the home. So these are all your limiting beliefs, and then you're going to decide what is a new better belief. AI again can help you with that. And then evidence. evidence doesn't have to only be from your own experience, it can be from things you've seen in the world that is good and that proves that this belief is true. Okay, and then once you've done that, you can just take a photo if you're happy to share that with AI, and then ask AI what are the potential core beliefs from this information in the specific area. Or again, you can do your own research and try and unpack that. And then what you might find also as you're going through these areas is that some beliefs seem to crop up in most areas, or maybe two or three areas on your wheel of life. I'm talking about the actual core beliefs that you've unpacked. And why is this, or why does this happen? Because there's actually only a certain amount of core beliefs which create hundreds of limiting beliefs um, in these different areas or in life in general, but they're coming from these main core beliefs. So let's say there's 10 or 20 main core beliefs that can infiltrate into your relationships, into your finances, into even your health. So, like a belief like I'm not good enough can influence all those areas in different ways, right? So when we we find the core belief and we start recoding the negative one, like I'm not good enough, for example, or I'm not enough, then it has this downstream effect and it makes changes in all these areas automatically almost. So we start living differently, being differently, thinking differently, behaving differently. That's why I think it's so important to do this work so that we can root out these core beliefs or these trauma imprints as well and make the changes, do the work for that, and then life just gets better and better and better and better. So essentially, what I'm saying is that unpacking these limiting beliefs, or a lot of them, is going to give you a much clearer idea on what the core belief is that needs recoding, or the trauma imprints, so that your internal system can be updated effectively. Instead of trying to change hundreds of little beliefs, um, we can go to the root cause and update that. And then just another tip, it's important, I think, to be in a relaxed state when you're recoding, and also to feel elevated emotions. So feel like the person that is good enough. If you're recoding, I am good enough, or who I am is enough. Feel the relief of having money. If you're struggling in finances and you recoding, new money beliefs, feel the gratitude, the appreciation. And I think that just helps us to imprint these beliefs a lot better. Um, People like to get in a good state as well. That does help to rewire things better. So or quicker maybe, there's little things that you can explore to help you with this process. Obviously, I can't mention everything in one session, but remember, this is the basis of a guide for you. It is a 7-step guide that I'm offering you to just make life a bit easier, to show you, these are the pitfalls, this is where we're going wrong, this is why we're struggling, and then to share information with you on how to overcome that, but then also to encourage you to explore it some more and to learn more on these different topics and on these different steps. So, next week, we'll also look at ideas or concepts like visualization, affirmations, and some meditation in a bit more detail. But until then, happy recoding. And I'll put up the link for last week's chapter if you would like to purchase that. Otherwise, have an amazing week. Keep going, keep elevating, and never give up. Your future self thanks you.